and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4 with Terry. And we're back as Japan. We haven't done anything yet. I've literally spent the last 50 minutes, or whatever the length of the last episode was, just explaining where we're at. And honestly, you kind of need that in order to understand what's even going on. Because there's a lot going on. And we have the full combined arms to figure out. So we've got land, air, and sea that we need to organize. Now, I am going to have to organize the Navy. I said I was, and the Air Force especially, because look at this. It's all over the place, right? It's everywhere, which is kind of nice, but not how we want things to be organized. So, and yeah, the Navy is scattered around a lot across the Pacific Islands. We need to get the Navy organized and ready for war. I have actually, out of interest, dug around a little bit and pull that up here. I have come across a 1941 top secret document from the United States Pacific Fleet, and that was pretty much the only thing I could find that contained an idea, at least in English, that contained an idea about the naval organization of Japan. So the Japanese combined fleet was effectively broken down organizationally into seven fleets, at least from what the Americans could see. There was the first fleet, which was the battle force and contained of multiple battleship divisions and destroyer squadrons and cruiser divisions. They had the second fleet as a scouting force, which had mostly cruiser and the divisions and destroyer squadrons. They had a third fleet, which was for blockading and transport, which was mostly more small craft and auxiliary, so we can kind of ignore that here. They had a fourth fleet, which was a more coastal defense force of sorts. And they had the fifth fleet that the Americans apparently didn't really know what it was. They had the sixth fleet, which was the submarine squadrons. And the seventh or first air fleet, which contained the 5 carrier divisions they had in 1941. So this sounds like a good starting point of just for us knowing like where we want to get historically, and also giving us a bit of an idea about what the Japanese were or how the Japanese organized their navy. So this is sort of relatively similar to where I want to go. Now, I don't want to again, I've never done this before, so bear with me. I don't want to have the carrier divisions and the actual main strike force separate, because I think that is one mistake that the Japanese were making frequently throughout the war, was to commit their forces piecemeal and take on too many actions at the same time, splitting up their forces and then not having enough firepower, holding back on the battleships, whereas the Americans, for example, would, after some painful lessons learned, would use fast battleships as carrier escorts and as bombardment forces. So in that regard, splitting things up like this, I think, is not a great idea. So we're going to have carrier task groups, which will contain carriers and actual heavy caliber ships and a good dose of screening ships. We will have scout groups, obviously, because we will be struggling for fuel always. So we will have scout groups to be much more lightweight, containing light cruisers, which are capable of, hopefully we can get some radar going, because that's something that the Japanese never had really during the war, and where the Americans definitely had a technical edge. And we will have a well-organized submarine fleet, because I am German after all, and submarines need to happen. So that's and then we'll have a group of older destroyers running escort duty that are not currently sitting and actually helping out with the fleets. So bunch of cheap destroyers running escorts, because we will have to transport troops and supplies all around. And yeah, if anyone's familiar with the Guadalcanal campaign and the whole supply situation, it should be this one, isn't it? No, it's Marshall Islands. Is that the same thing? I don't know. I'll have to look it up. No, it's Carolines. Yeah, it should be here. It should be these actually, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, anyway. What was it? These out here. I don't even know what that is. No, this is just some. This is just some atolls or something. Gilbert Islands. No. Anyway. Yeah, the Japanese were struggling a lot around the Guadalcanal campaign, where nothing was ever enough, and a lot of things were fed piecemeal, while the main force of the Japanese was ineffectively trundling around, wasting fuel, because of, well, fear of commitment and a lack of coordination between the army and the navy and the air force and everything else. So we're not going to repeat those mistakes. We are going to hit them and hit them hard when we can, and we'll get the battles on our terms, hopefully. So for that, we're going to need an awful lot of scout ships, because we have a lot of naval areas to cover. So even if we just want to cover up to Hawaii, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, probably 10, depending on how far south we go. 11. So we're gonna need probably 15 scout groups easily if we want to cover over areas here as well, just to keep an eye on stuff. We will be building up Micronesia around with radar stations and land-based air as much as we can, such that our long-range bombers can help with all kinds of things. And we're going to try our best to control the Pacific. And in order to control the Pacific, we need information. Information is key, knowing where the enemy is, knowing what the enemy is doing, which also means we're going to have to deal with intelligence quite a bit. So yeah, this is no easy task that we've set ourselves here, because we'll be up against the world, more or less. Not hopefully all at the same time, but that's the general plan. Now, enough waffling. I'm going to quickly organize the Army, Navy, and Air Force into something slightly more resembling something I can actually work with, rather this complete dog's breakfast that we're having sitting here in peacetime, because we are going to rush into war with China. Once again, not this episode. So if you don't like this sort of organizational and stock-taking thing and talking about strategy, then feel free to skip to the next episode. I will let you know once the actual fighting starts. So, right, I'll be back in a minute. I'll fast forward through it because it's just a bit tedious in terms of sorting through things. We'll be here for hours if I let that run on normal speed, and it's honestly not all that interesting. So I'll be right back. Okay, this has taken an excessive amount of time, but I think I have sorted things slightly the way I want them to. So, let's begin with our army organization. We've got the first army, which I've converted completely into the infantry template. We still have to adjust that infantry template a little bit, because right now this is a 24 width, which is a little bit large for my taste. So I would like that to be a I'd like to get rid of 3 infantry divisions here and replace them with 1 artillery division plus a support artillery. We are not going to do an awful lot of pushing with the infantry. I mean, obviously, yes, we are, but we'll hopefully rely more on the air to do that for us. We have the second army, which consists completely of these defense divisions, and they're not great. They've got a combat width of 12, and they have no support equipment whatsoever. They're just a bunch of infantry troops on low priority. So these guys are not going to push anywhere. They're just there to hold the line in case of Chinese counterattacks. So I want to use these troops ideally to push forward, and I want to use these troops, and I'm going to have to change the color of my army group 1 here. Because otherwise this is getting confusing. What have we not used yet? That we haven't used yet. Have we not? No. Okay, so the first army is mainly going to be doing the one who's going to be doing the attacking, and the second army is mostly there to fill the lines and defend. We have a small group of Homeland Defense Forces. We don't really need them at this point because no one is going to actually invade us. But these troops here, once the war with China is done, will eventually move over to the Homeland Defense. And we have the third army, which is currently relatively small, which is which is all of our mechanized force as much as it exists, and they also have currently the special forces in them. I might shuffle that a little bit around again, but the general idea is at this point, once we actually can get to attacking China, we're going to get the second army in place up in the north, and we are going to get them to hold this line, because we're not going to be calling Menguko or Manchukuo into the war, and as such the Chinese aren't going to be attacking them because, well, they're not officially participants, which means we only have these three squares to hold here, which means that these troops should be able to just hold this and just hold it against the Chinese divisions, and until we can get some reinforcements in if we need them. Meanwhile, and until we can get out of these debuffs, because if we are going down to the Marco Polo Bridge incident, you see that our defense and offense is severely compromised. So these guys are mostly just going to be here to, well, no, make sure the Chinese don't push through. I might actually build some forts if I can fit it in, so I don't forget. That might not be a terrible idea. We're going to build. Let's put these. Level 3 forts should be enough. I don't think the Chinese have an awful lot here. And we're just going to send these not completely up top, but relatively far up top. I've got a long construction queue sitting here, just mostly to build up our civilian infrastructure, because we don't have a lot of factories, and we are going to need to do a lot of improvements to the infrastructure, because our supply situation is going to be absolutely dire. I think the first one that I actually remember is that the train line between the Kanto Naval Base and Tokyo is too small, because that is that's not a fully upgraded railway actually. Let me see if I can get that maxed out, because that's also one of those things. Yeah, Kanto Tokyo needs to be fully upgraded. That is very, very essential. Otherwise, we'll have big problems with getting the supply through from here to to all the hubs that are, and most of the overseas supply lines are actually coming out of Kanto. So this line totally needs to be upgraded. Otherwise, we're not getting enough supply out, and all the supply here in northern China needs to come through the connection between Busan and Kanto here. So as long as that's not happening, and this isn't happening, we're not going to be fighting here very much. But the plan is also not to push through this narrow bottleneck. The plan is to naval invade, most likely close to Shanghai. Because if we're looking at China, a lot of the... We don't really know where the industry is, but we know that the industry is on the coastal side. So if we can push through, if we can naval invade around Shanghai, and maybe do another one around Qingdao, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, then we can cut them, we can kind of threaten them here and relieve this a little bit, and we can hopefully take this river line here around Nanjing, which is their current capital, and see if we can cut off this whole area here. This is unfortunately all mountainous, so fighting in here is not going to be fun. But if we can just take this away from them and eventually break through into the hinterland, then that will be a great success. So getting across these rivers is going to be difficult. But here it's mostly open plains, but there's not much in terms of infrastructure. So pushing through here is going to be fun. But the idea is to launch 2 naval invasions, one here and one here, and to flood most of our first army probably around Nanjing and get the... we might be splitting it up a bit and get some troops sent up here this way as well. I am going to train a couple more troops, but we are 15,000 infantry equipment in the deficit, and we need a lot more support equipment, and we're going to need a lot more artillery once I am getting around to changing my templates up. So this is still going to be a little bit, but yes, ideally we'll have some more actual infantry troops in here. Otherwise, we might just temporarily get these guys reassigned here and help out with the defense. But ideally, I want to cut off this peninsula here, take this port, and eventually push up here and lock them in. Now they are going to pull the Shangji group into the war, which means that we can't cut them off against the border because this is going to be part of it. But ideally, we'd eventually take over this area once we have relieved them down from this naval invasion down south here, and then we'll be pushing through this central area more or less all the way through China. Ideally, I don't want to fight anybody up in the north because this is all mountains. There's no fun to mountains and desert. There's no fun to fight in. I want to completely bypass these, and this is an interesting target. So we may, because a lot of their resources is down here. So we look at that. They have very little resources except for this area, and for what they're going to be doing, they're going to be mostly needing steel. So if we can take over their steel resources down south here, maybe we'll launch another invasion over from Taiwan. That might work. Yeah, it is actually Taiwan right now. It's not Formosa anymore. We might be able to launch another naval invasion down here, but I haven't really decided on that quite yet. Now, so that's the army organization. We're still moving the troops into place. Currently, they're just scattered all over the countryside, and obviously out of supply because we're moving around here in these areas. I am also planning to relieve my puppet states of their armies. So I'm going to get these guys to send me all their 3 divisions, and I'm going to get these guys to send me all their 9 divisions. And that will, given that they're my puppets, they can't really do anything about it, will get me another 12 divisions that I can use. As a that'll be the colonial force, and we'll give them a general, but they're mostly going to be just there for they're cannon fodder, really, because I don't really care about them very much. So Yeah, do we have we've got a fair amount of cavalry. Do we happen to have a cavalry officer around? That might not be a terrible thing. Do we? This is infantry. We have an awful lot of officers though. We've got substance abusers. And yeah, there's a cavalry officer. We might as well use him. I am interested in people who are good with the supply consumption. So if he's actually, do we have anyone better? Yes, we could. He's also a cavalry officer. Perfect. So he's going to lead, and you people are going to be the. We'll give you a color that I haven't used yet. You are being the colonial force. And you are there for cannon fodder. Colonial force. There we go. So these guys, probably I am just going to put them onto a fallback line. Actually, I could use them to just hold this line and use my own troops as fallback. That might not be a terrible idea. I'm not sure if these 12 divisions can hold this though. So yeah. No, actually, I might use my own divisions here to hold, and use these guys on a fallback line, just somewhere up north here, so they don't consume so much supply. And then they can, we can use them to reinforce, or we can use them if we're trying to push. Then these guys are going to be doing the attacking. The rest of my forces is just going to be sitting there to defend. So that is the plan for that. Right, the Air Force. Where's my Air Force? I have reorganized my Air Force because it was an utter garbage mess. So we've got none of my Air Force had any experience. So reorganizing them hasn't cost us anything. We've got the carriers, which have their air wings. We have got one wing of 57 naval bombers, who are sitting over here in Kyushu and are just covering this area. There is a little bit of a Chinese Navy, so we will have to get some strike groups out to just cover this area. I have a relatively small airport over here. So in Dalian we have a group of our tactical bombers, and look at the range that these guys are having. These guys are actually, no, that's not their range, is it? That should be larger than that. Oh yeah. So the big circle, that's the tactical bombers. This one. Look at the range on these things. The small one, that's a fighter wing that we have. So while the Chinese do have some air, I'm planning to use the carriers to cover the naval invasions, and then move planes over as soon as we can get it, because the fighters are not going to be able to cover very much here of the fighting at all. They might be covering this naval invasion here once we get to it, and the bulk of our air force is currently sitting over there, not being able to do an awful lot. But I am breaking them down into wings of 100, and they are there to move in once. Like for example, if we take the Beijing airport here, then we can move them over, and they can lend much better support in this air region. And the same if there should be some airports down around here somewhere. So if we can capture anything, then we can move them in. But the idea is on the long term that the heavy lifting is done by the tactical bombers, because of the range is so much larger from these things than everything else. So they are sitting at the closest. We might also be upgrading the airport here, but I don't think it's necessary, because we're just planning to hold here, and the majority of the forces should be coming in via naval invasions, hopefully, and hopefully be able to if we can cut their supply lines. So where's their capital? So here's their capital. So that's the source of their supply. So if we can isolate the capital and not actually take the capital, but cut their supply lines here, then most of their troops are going to run into supply issues. They're going to have to just live off whatever they have in their areas, but they're not actually getting anything out of the capital. So if we can manage to push across the river here and get through here, cut their supply lines, that should give us a bit of a bonus. Okay, that brings us to the Navy. Now, we have naval view. I first have merged everything, and I've divided up into several fleets. So we've got the first fleet under the man himself, Isoroku Yamamoto. So he's commanding the first carrier group, which currently has our 4 only carriers that we have around. We've got 2 battleships. We can have a closer look. So we've got Ryujo, Akagi, Hosho, and Kaga. Most of these are relatively obsolete. We can actually upgrade Ryujo, so that might be something I'll do. We've got Nagato, which is our current flagship. We've got Fuso, Maya, and Shokai as heavy cruisers, and then we've got we've got 8 capital ships, and we've got 24 screens. That is a little bit underscreened, but I need more still. So I'm going to get some more screens for these. Once we have more destroyers coming in, then they will go join this group here. And then we've got a whole bunch of strike groups. We've got strike forces, usually comprising some battleships or battle cruisers. And I'm throwing a couple of light cruisers and destroyers in here. And the other ones are looking pretty much similar. So these groups are there to sit in port, because these big ships are consuming an awful lot of fuel. These groups are there to sit in port, and I've gone down to the point that I've just gotten some heavy cruisers and some destroyer escorts. They're there to sit in port and just get out when there is when something is spotted. So this comprises the first fleet, which is the combination of the first and seventh historic fleet, because I'm combining the carrier groups and the regular strike forces into one, because I have the power of hindsight. We've got the 6th fleet, which is the submarine fleet, under Admiral, Tadashige Daigo. Okay, so he is he has, can I see that? Yes, he's got the Seawolf's trait. So he's good at, while he's a novice, he's got a good submarine attack. So I've got that divided up into submarine squadrons of 10. I think historically they were somewhere around 8, 9, 10. But 10 sounds like a good number. So we've got these just and I'm not using the Japanese descriptions because I'm not going to remember what everything is. So I've just got some submarine. I'm using the US Navy designations for these things just to make it easier for me to understand what's what here. We've got the 3rd fleet, which is a sort of support and escort fleet, and they have a small group of mine-laying destroyers. That's the Katsuriki class. We might build some more of those things if we want. And we have just a couple of leftover destroyers as so this is the Momi class, the second line destroyers. So they were not they were from a time when the Japanese had first-rate and second-rate destroyers. So we can upgrade these all, and I am planning to upgrade these to something a little bit better, just so we can use them for other things. But because I think the template for the design for this is, the design for this is absolutely dreadful. They have no anti-submarine capabilities, so we can upgrade these to. What can we upgrade these to? We can upgrade these to we could upgrade these to Katsuriki class. That would be the mine layers, or we could upgrade them to Fubuki, which has some anti-submarine, but these are more like our fleet screens, so they're not also ideal. So we might leave these here, and later on, once we actually have a template for anti-submarine warfare, then we can upgrade these based on that template. And then we've got 2 old coastal defense ships, which are just like, they're heavy cruisers technically, but they don't have much in terms of gun or anything. So these are old coastal defense ships. They're just sitting in reserve. I'm not really doing anything with those. Okay, and that is pretty much the setup of these things.